Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts doing a new episode of The Whole Athlete with a guest on the show I've been trying to get on for months. We just finally connected after working on the low carb keto cruise with Jimmy Moore and listening to him at KetoCon. And I thought really need to have this guy on our show to talk about the low carb athlete and how it relates to fueling and training and performing from a bodybuilder's perspective to how that overlaps with the endurance world training for events. So I have Robert Sikes on the show today, who's the podcast and host of Keto Savage and much more in his business world. He's amazing. So Robert, thank you for coming on and sharing your story today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you are the ambitious, successful entrepreneur sharing your story. If you could just share with our listeners how you came down this path to become Keto Savage, what you created in your business, and just kind of how you came from being a bodybuilder in a different world to keto-based bodybuilder.
Ooh, so it's a wormhole.
All in 2 minutes. Just kidding.
So make a long story short, basically I've been bodybuilding for 10 plus years now, and I was following a traditional, bro diet, so to speak, with high protein, high carbs and low fat. And I just felt poorly. I've always done well with the shows, but even when I was doing that, I just felt suboptimal. I developed a bunch of eating disorders. Just suffered with a lot of mental issues around food. So I knew there had to be a better way. I kind of dove into all different types of dieting protocols, fell into keto by accident, and I just felt much better. I felt much more in tune with my body. I didn't have to guess as to what my intake needed to be. It just seemed to all make sense. Everything just kind of fell into place. And my performance in the gym did not suffer whatsoever. My relationship with food improved. Everything just got better. And I'd lived that way for a while, but I never really considered doing a bodybuilding prep with a ketogenic style eating. But I figured, I feel so good doing this, I might just jump in and see how it goes. There was no roadmap to follow. There was no coach that I had that had done this before. So I kind of blazed my own trail, so to speak, and tweaked a few things and played around with it to see if it would work for a bodybuilding prep. And lo and behold, I, was able to reach my best conditioning to date. I won the competition, won my pro card, and it did so completely ketogenic, never once introduced carbs. I felt much better. I performed much better. And it was much more sustainable. Like, it didn't have near the negative effects that normally come with a competition prep diet. And after that, I'm like, okay, this is where it's at. So I just basically committed myself to learning all I could about the diet, the lifestyle, and then creating content and a brand and a business around that so that I can add that value to others that may be going through something similar. And just wanted to improve their overall health. So since then, I've built Keto Savage. We built Keto Brick, my wife and I, to offer a meal replacement bar that fits the ketogenic macros. And we've got a couple other businesses on the side that we're just growing as we go, but loving every minute of it.
Yeah, you are a big inspiration to many. And I think your story is so impactful because so many people struggle, but they don't start to think outside of the box. Like, all right, what I'm doing isn't working and there must be another solution. And as you said, no one else was doing keto for bodybuilding, and you searched out your own research. I would find you created your own program. Are you saying you just kind of researched online, and how did you come out with doing a keto for bodybuilder program without really anyone else doing it before?
Trial and error mostly. I mean, typically people will go through a bodybuilding prep and they'll leave protein very high because they're, having high protein, the theory is, will prevent you from being catabolic as you're decreasing calories to lose body fat for a show. And they'll keep their fat very low, and they'll manipulate carbs based off of what their timing is, and if they need to fill out more for a show, et cetera, et cetera. But inevitably, when you take your fat down that low and your calories are that low, you maintain that for too long, you're going to have a hit to your metabolism, your hormones, everything's going to be negatively impacted. And you just start feeling very poorly. That's why a lot of people walk around like zombies, the month before competition. And for me, being keto, like the last thing I want to do is take away my fat, since that's pretty much what I'm getting all my energy from. And carbs obviously stayed low, but the protein is what I decided to manipulate the most. So whereas most competitors have, 250, 300 grams of protein, I'm taking in, at one point I was down to 65 grams of protein a day. And for, a male bodybuilder with as much muscle mass as I had, having 65 grams of protein a day is pretty unheard of. So it was totally stark contrast to everything else that anybody else was doing. But it worked really well. I didn't really lose any muscle. I was hitting PRs in the gym a week before I stepped on stage, which is pretty unheard of too. So the main reason people keep protein high to be anti-catabolic and maintain lean muscle tissue, I was keeping protein incredibly low and I was hitting PRs. So whatever I was doing was definitely working, and I've been able to replicate it in additional competitions that I've done and also with my clients. So it's a method that I feel very strongly about because it's been proven to be effective.
So I think there's a lot of confusion probably, or myths out there for other people trying to build muscle, that they think they need a high carb or high protein diet because you build muscle from protein. So how did you start to research and learn and explain to others that it isn't protein, that you can still build muscle with a higher fat keto type of diet?
Well, protein's definitely important. And like when I'm in an off season, I'm in a building phase, I definitely try and ensure that I'm getting enough adequate protein in. But there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. I mean, more is not always better. There's a point at which any additional protein is just going to be excreted in your urine. So there's no need to have, obscene amounts of protein, 300, 400 grams of protein a day, like some bodybuilders will, say is necessary. But the main thing is to have defined phases, so to speak. So having a legitimate building phase where protein is adequate, and then having a legitimate cutting phase where your primary goal shifts from building muscle to losing body fat. You can do both at the same time, but you're not really going to optimize for either of those if you're trying to do both at the same time, because they kind of compete for one another. I mean, if you're trying to lose body fat, you need to roughly be in an energy deficit. And if you're trying to build muscle, you need to be in energy surplus so that you can build that tissue. So when I transition into a cut for a show, I'm making protein my manipulator variable and taking that down, but I make sure that I have enough protein when my primary goal is to build muscle.
So talk about the phases. And I think we're saying how much it correlates to endurance training. But for bodybuilding, you're saying there's, different phases of training or in lifting weights, whatever you call it in your world. But the phases of training and prepping for an event is similar as endurance events. Let's kind of talk about your bodybuilding world, how you break your season up to training, and if we can briefly touch on how your macros will change based on your date of your event.
For sure. So generally speaking, my training, the actual training itself doesn't change that much from off-season building phase to a contest prep phase. You don't want to decrease your training intensity or volume as you go into a prep, because you basically want to convince your body that you still need that muscle tissue. So if you're eating fewer calories and you're training less, your body's going to start tapping into that muscle store to fuel itself. Whereas if you're training hard throughout and trying to maintain the strength that you've built up to that point, it's basically convincing the body that, okay, we still need this muscle. Let's not catabolize our muscle tissue to fill in this gap from the decreased calories. But as far as training goes, I don't really make any drastic changes there as far as contest prep versus normal off season. I'll increase cardio slightly, and I'll just try to, increase the intensity or the volume by adding in supersets or drop sets, just something to kind of have a progressive overload concept going as calories decrease. But as far as having a legitimate building phase and cutting phase, this is one thing that I see a lot of people make the mistake of. They are constantly trying to cut down and lose body fat, and they're not giving their body any time in a surplus or a maintenance state. And when you do that for, months and months on end, sometimes years on end, you're in this chronic caloric deficit. That's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on your metabolism and your hormones. And that's why you see people basically reset their baseline caloric intake and their baseline metabolic rate at a very low level, which, I mean, when you're that low, there's little runway left to manipulate things and improve your composition. So a lot of people make the mistake of doing that, just staying chronically depleted. And then they're basically having to reset things at a higher rate, and that takes time and often comes with a little bit of unnecessary body fat gain.
So you measure your macros, you're saying, and I was looking on your website, you have a keto macro calculator. So talk about that and how you stay not being obsessive or feel like you're dieting or a type of eating disorder, because I think that's common for everyone in every sport. That's, I think when you get so, you have to dial in your macros when you're bodybuilding and even for endurance athletes, but how do you make it sustainable and not a diet, more of a lifestyle and listening to your body?
So when I'm in the building phase, I don't track macros near as religiously. Like I'm just focused on making sure I'm getting enough protein in, enough total calories in to be in a surplus. My carbs stay low year round because I'm keto, obviously. So I don't really have high carb days ever. But I just ensure that I'm taking in enough protein and enough total calories. And I kind of tweak the fat ratio based off of how I'm feeling energy-wise. If I feel more lethargic, it's often because my fat ratios dipped a little bit. So I'll make sure to bump that up. I personally feel better when about 77 to 80% of my calories are coming from fat. So I'll try and maintain that ratio throughout, both off-season and contest prep. But then when I get into a competition prep, I'm really focusing on macro accuracy. I try and control as many variables as possible. So I treat the whole thing like a science experiment. The more variables I have control of, the more things I can manipulate and know with certainty, okay, this is affecting this in this way. A lot of people go into a prep and they have so many things changing that they don't really know what's causing the change. And then they're kind of left not knowing how to manipulate and improve their current situation. So I try and control for everything. I try and control for the sleep quality I'm getting, my training, my macros. Like I really get hyper-focused and hypersensitive on everything. But then I have that definite disconnect period when I'm transitioned into an off-season and I don't track near as religiously. So it's a lot more of a, this is a defined time to really dial it in and get serious. And this is the time to kind of take it easy and have a more sustainable lifestyle. But I think having that defined phase is key, because if you were to try and, track so accurately like a competition prep year round, you would wind up burning out. And then when you burn out, you're not able to put forth the discipline necessary during a period of a competition prep.
And I think that's similar to endurance athletes. Say you're training for a triathlon or marathon or 50K trail run, that you have to, here's my date, here's what I'm working towards. And then there's an off season where I think for people that are needing to change their nutrition to work on becoming fat adapted and figuring out that N=1, that everyone's bio individual, how much of each macros they need to become fat adapted. So how do you work with your athletes when they're coming to you for help and they want to be more of a keto athlete? How do you transition them into becoming a more fat burning, and how do you test and measure that?
So like when I've got a client come to me, the first thing I do is try to figure out where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. If they've been chronically under eating for far too long and they've been getting all of the carbohydrate based sources, then my first priority is to ramp up their metabolism so we can have a better starting position going forward. So I'll start basically reverse dieting them and gradually increasing their calories. And if that comes with a little bit of body fat gain at the onset, that's just part of it. I mean, you have to reset that metabolism, that hormonal and metabolic rate higher before you can really, taper calories or do anything manipulations wise there. But if they're already sitting at a good, healthy caloric intake, their baseline's reset at a high level, I typically advocate for the higher fat ratio. Like I know this is a controversial topic in the keto space, but if your goal is to become fat adapted and truly tap into using both dietary fat and stored fat, adipose tissue for fuel, I think having a higher fat ratio is going to be optimal, because that's going to basically demand that your body learn to use that fuel you're giving it and that fuel you have stored in the most efficient way possible. So I'll typically start clients at about 80% fat ratio and then increase protein while simultaneously decreasing fat, so we can figure out what their protein and fat thresholds are. And then we can adjust based off of what their goal is, whether it be building muscle or losing body fat.
Yeah, because I think that's a big thing for athletes, especially I hosted my first annual low carb athlete seminar at Ironman Hawaii this year. And, we had 50 something people register and only 19 people attended, but it was great, start creating that impact in the endurance world, because so many endurance athletes, which is a total fat burning process, that you would think more people would understand the need to become fat adapted as endurance athlete, but we've still got a long way to go. But anyways, the process of being fat adapted and making that switch, I think, is important time to do in the off season, and teach people, like you're saying, to adjust those macros based on where you are at now. So do you use Keto Mojo or have them test blood sugar, glucose levels in their ketones, or how do you figure out what works for the person, or just intuitive nutrition?
So I'll test, ketones, glucose and ketones initially to kind of see where things are at, but eventually people will figure out based off of how they feel. They can tell if they're, in a fat burning state or not based off of what their nutrition is and how they're feeling based off of that. So like if they go out and have a crazy carb binge, then it's worthwhile to kind of see what the numbers are looking like, so we can kind of see how far off base we got. But generally speaking, my clients' carbs are always incredibly low, like sub 10 to 20 grams total carbs a day. So generally speaking, they're not going to have to worry about having high glucose readings. And if they're at the higher fat ratio, generally speaking, their ketones are always pretty solid. And plus, the more adapted you get, oftentimes those numbers trend downwards because your body gets more efficient at shuttling those ketone bodies into the cell. So like if you've been adapted for years, you often have lower ketone readings. So it kind of is better to focus on how you feel and perform based off of just the numerical value alone. As far as, what you said about using fat for endurance sports, I couldn't agree more. I don't claim to be an endurance athlete by any means, but I got tired of having people, say that one rule applies for one group and not necessarily a different sport. But I've done bodybuilding, I've done a lot of different sports, and I've interviewed people that have done endurance sports, and I feel like everybody that transitions to a fat adapted state, they just have a much more sustainable engine and a much more longer lasting engine inside them, so to speak. So like I decided to run a marathon last year with zero training. I literally did not run at all for years. And I just for a marathon. And I wanted to kind of prove the point that, hey, look, if you're fat adapted, you can make this work. And I ran the entire marathon and never trained for it. I did it in a keto adapted state, never once had a carb meal, pasta refeed the night before, like most marathoners advocate for. So it's definitely doable.
How'd your body feel after that?
My body felt fine except for my feet. My feet, I'm still missing toenails.
My hips would hurt doing without training. That's hard.
Yeah.
So
rough.
I was going to add in too, like you said, the kind of the debates going on, and we had a lot of them, I think, at KetoCon, and hearing this more and more with everybody of keto carnivore. And, everyone on the cruise that spoke with us at Jimmy Moore's cruise were a lot of like Dr. Berry, and everyone seems to be more on the higher protein animal fats and the nose to tail protocol for athletes and bodybuilding and just general health. So what's your take on more of a carnivore versus more a high fat approach?
So I would define myself as like, I can't say that I'm carnivore because I definitely eat things that are not solely animal based, but I'm carnivore-esque, I guess is a good way to put it. Like I predominantly eat mostly animal proteins. I don't eat a lot of vegetables. Every once in a while I get a hankering for a salad, so I'll have it and not feel bad about it, but I don't generally eat I don't go out of my way to eat vegetation. But I add a lot of the fats to the meats that I eat, and I eat fatty cuts of meat. So my fat ratio stays very high even by following a carnivore-esque approach. I feel like, if you're keto adapted and you're eating incredibly lean sources of protein and not having very much dietary fat, you're just not going to feel as good. There are some outliers for sure, but generally speaking, all the clients I've worked with and everybody I've talked with, if they're keto adapted and they're having a very high protein relative to fat intake, they just don't feel optimal. They can still lose body fat, they still lose total weight, but it's not like the best for overall performance and human optimization, in my opinion.
Well, I find a lot of times I hear and read and get clients asking questions about just the digestion process. And that's what as I became a nutritional therapy practitioner and just finishing my FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner exam, so I can do functional lab testing with people and put it kind of all this together into a coaching program to help people with digestion and liver function and hormone balance. And I think that's a big area of people go from a stressful life and they start piling on fat and protein and they don't work on their foundations first. To me, there's a lot of people that might be struggling with changing. Well, sorry, there's a bunch of birds outside. So it's really loud. I think a lot of people struggle with proper digestion and the liver for years of, just environmental toxins, but hidden internal stressors and eating the processed foods that people have done for years. It's really, my approach is now focusing on, let's work on your liver function and let's work on digestion processes as taking some HCl supplement, digestive enzymes, and working on your gut biome and getting that gut wall stronger so we're not having signs and symptoms of leaky gut, gut dysfunction. But are you finding people, they make that big transition from a typical standard American diet to a more high fat and protein diet? Do you find people have any struggles with digestion?
Yeah, there's definitely a period of your body has to take to get acclimated to having that higher protein, higher fat intake, especially, like I said, if they're coming from just a stressful environment, they've been eating carbs predominantly their whole life. I mean, you're basically switching your machinery over a little bit. So it's going to take some time to get acclimated to that. I've had a lot of nutritional therapists on my podcast, and they oftentimes point to people being deficient in stomach acid. So supplementing with like an HCl and then some bile salts initially until their body is able to figure out what and how to assimilate that fat and protein intake seems to do pretty well for most people. I personally haven't felt poorly with the high fat and protein, but I've been eating this way for 5+ years now. So,
and you're young too. I think it's a lot of people that have been eating like, the wrong, unhealthy way, thinking they're healthy, but for doing that for years and they make this switch. I think the older we are, when longer that we've been eating more the high carb, non-fat way, they're probably going to have more digestive issues, I would think.
Absolutely.
So when you're having your prep for an event and you have, or even any time of the year, what kind of things do you do before and after your training sessions when you're leading up to a race or event? Do you kind of fall into that 30-minute window? I must eat something after a workout. And, what kind of things do you do and suggest to people to experiment with?
So it's funny, coming from a typical bodybuilding background, you definitely have this stigma that, hey, if you don't have a protein shake 30 minutes after your workout, then you're just totally losing all your gains, which could not be farther from the truth. All the research now shows that you've got a several hour window to really tap into that full protein synthesis, that window there. So like, as long as you're eating enough protein on a day-to-day basis, I think you're solid. As long as you're eating enough total calories on a day-to-day basis, I think you're solid. I oftentimes just gravitate towards what's best and most convenient for me and my schedule that day. So I wake up at 3 and I train very early in the morning. But if I was to have a meal that early in the morning, I normally feel a little bit sluggish after a meal, even if it's just a strictly ketogenic meal. Just simply having something on my gut, it's not the best for me from like a mental clarity standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I've got like a bunch of podcasts going on throughout the day. Like I want to be, hitting on all 8 cylinders. So I'll oftentimes push back. I normally eat 2 meals a day, and I'll normally push both those back to later in the day. Have like a delayed lunch for my first meal, and then my second meal normally around 5 or 6 p.m. But having no, heavy food source on my system the first several hours a day throughout the morning is best for me, and I haven't felt like that's had an adverse effect on my ability to build muscle whatsoever.
So do you do fasted workouts in the morning when you're lifting weights, or do you take any shakes like you can? Some people are using. What's your kind of program for yourself?
No shakes. I'll have a coffee. I like waking up having a coffee, and I've been putting some heavy cream and MCT oil in the coffee, but basically just a fat fast prior to my first meal. So I'll have 2 coffees in the morning, one before training and then one at some point after the training. But no large meal before. And like I said, several hours before I go to bed, I'll have that last meal of the day. So it's a pretty significant fast before I hit the gym.
Yeah, I find, not eating 2-3 hours before bed is amazing. So I don't eat after 5 o'clock and during the weekdays. And it's made an amazing difference to my sleep and how I feel the next day too.
Do you track your sleep? Anything like an Aura ring or anything like that?
I've tried ordering last year, attempted twice for my husband and I don't think we just both I don't know if I'll use it. It's great to have all that data, but I've been saying this on my podcast and speaking with people that I think too much less is more. As I work on teaching people about chronic stress and always working on my own self for my health and optimizing my performance, that I think too much gadgets and tracking is just stress, and sleeping and having all these different devices. I'm, the anti-cell phone in the room, and having an Oura ring would be nice, but I don't know if I could sleep with it on. But I don't really. I just go by how I feel. And I know if I eat too close to bed, I can't fall asleep, and I have digestion issues, feel like, everything's coming back up. And I like just not eating, especially starting to eat more meat. I can't for sure have like a steak and then go to bed 2 hours later. Definitely does not stay down.
Yeah, no, I totally respect the minimizing the gadgets too. I mean, I have an Oura ring, but I use it kind of, I don't plan my day based off of the data. Basically, like some people let that information affect them in a negative way, and I like just having it so that I can look back and see, okay, this is possibly what led to me feeling this way, but I don't let it dictate my day to day, so to speak. I feel like that's a trap that people can fall into if they let the gadgets rule their world.
I think it's good to have something like that, even testing your glucose every day, doing something for 30, 60 days and get to know what it feels like. Then I might not look at it. But I think coaching athletes, I like to have them use Oura ring to measure the recovery, because the heart rate variability and tendency for type A, AAA athletes is to overtrain and under recover. And so many people, and all workouts on endurance athletes, I think, do too much. And trying to educate people that less is more, and you're going to get more results and more bang for the buck the way you can train and be more efficient, and how to space your workouts apart so you're going to get a better workout. And even if you're doing weights and doing HIIT training, and so many people I think do too much back to back. So using an Oura ring will make them realize that, because I think a lot of people, as I share in my Life is on a Race book, that I didn't know those red flags for years. And so I was in acute phase of HPA axis dysfunction for so many years, and I didn't know. And my goal is to educate other people that, okay, here are these red flags that you're ignoring. If you keep ignoring them, you're going to switch over to compensatory phase of dysfunction, and you keep going, you're going to be in exhaustive phase. So wear an Oura ring to at least give people intuitive training, same with nutrition and performing, to give them more biofeedback to know, okay, that's what it feels like. So I think people feel like that's a new normal, to be, okay, not sleeping, to having this constant fatigue. And if they don't know what really good feels like, a good night's sleep, what does that feel like? What is full energy? And when you go do your training session, how do you feel? Amazing. It's like, that's what you should feel every time. So I think, there's a lot of it that crosses over to all of our sports that we love to do. And I think working on the whole athlete, as I preach, is the essential part to optimizing your performance and longevity.
No, I totally agree. I mean, sleep is often overlooked, and it has a huge impact on everything based off of how you're performing in the training, how you perform on events, how you perform mentally throughout the day. Like, I've always kind of put sleep on the back burner, but one of my goals with this prep that I've just started is to really kind of prioritize sleep and make sure that that's not taking a back seat, and I'm actually getting adequate sleep throughout the entirety of my prep.
And I think it's something you have to, maybe not enjoy as many evening activities during the week, because I've become strict with, all right, I want to be home because I need to be home by 7, because I like to go to bed. I get up at 4:45 in the morning. So 7 o'clock, I like to be home and start to decompress and have time to read my book and get ready for sleep and have that sleep hygiene protocol. And I think you have to let go of the being a social. So it's kind of the the switch off that you feel better the next day and your workouts are great. And so you kind of have your friends or maybe more your social circle might be people like you that are athletes that, aren't out till 11 o'clock at night at some dinner event on a weekday, school night, I say, and having 3 or more cocktails.
Yeah, it's definitely a little disconnect between being an elite level athlete and also trying to be someone that goes out and hits up the bars at 11 p.m., 12 p.m. and has a productive day the next day. Like they kind of compete for one another. You have to kind of pick one or the other.
I know. So example, yesterday was my birthday, and my husband and I went for a run at 4:30, then went to this Italian restaurant. So we did some intervals, and so I did have some pizza crust, but it was a good Italian thin crust. We got, meat on it and some arugula. And so we did a workout first, but we ate dinner at, I think it was 5:30, and then we were home by 6:45. So it was this kind of way we have to roll, and you got to work out. And if you're going to eat dinner, it's good to do a higher intensity workout beforehand.
No, for sure. I think the longer I've been on this earth and tried to focus on health and well-being, I don't have any problem at all telling people I got to go to bed at 8 o'clock. They just got to deal with it.
I know. It's funny. So going back to, your different training programs in the Keto Brick, how do people use that? And talk about what Keto Brick is and how you've really grown that as a product.
So it's kind of funny. Keto Brick was never even meant to be a product. It was just something that I made for my own benefits. When I went through my last competition prep, I needed a reliable, shelf-stable food source that made hitting my higher fat ratio macro goals more efficient, more effective. And there was nothing really on the market that did that. So I started experimenting, playing around with different formulations, and I made this, first generation brick, and it's had several versions thereafter, but it was only for my prep benefit. Basically, I just wanted this to fit my need, and I had it on a YouTube video and didn't really think anything of it. I was just had a YouTube video basically explaining what I was doing for the prep, and people kept asking about this brick. They kept asking, where can I get it? How can I make it? Where do I buy these things? And I was like, oh, it's just nothing, something I'm playing around with. And I just kept getting all these comments, all these questions about how to get them. And my mom was watching my YouTube videos, and she's like, you got to start making these into a product. And I'm like, okay, well, just dive into it. So Crystal, my girlfriend at the time, wife now, she and I just started looking into, what was involved in making a food product from the health department standpoint, how to be legal with it all, how to set up this business, these taxes, all this stuff. And started making these things out of our kitchen, and then moved into a commercial kitchen space. Now we have 3 warehouse buildings we're producing these things out of. And it's just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I never would have thought this would be what it is today, but I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude and just thanks, because the community has been so good to us and provided so much support. And I'm just happy to be able to add value with this food product.
I had no idea how big you were until KetoCon, and your booth was like the main social area where everyone was hanging out and trying those brick bars, and your seminar and everything. And how old are you again?
I just turned 28 last week.
That's what I thought, 28. So I think you always just inspire me so much. It's like, oh my God, you're 28. Look how much success you've had and how you've grown something just from following your own passion and knowing what your purpose is and creating impact. And that's so inspirational for other people to learn from. But I appreciate what you've done for your industry. I did want to talk back. You mentioned, eating disorder in the past, because I think a lot of athletes struggle with that, and switching over to, we've talked to Jessica Reynolds, and we're going to talk to Mary, but I think there's a lot of people out there that struggle with nutrition and the relationship to food, and work out, trying to use that as a tool, or trying to out exercise a bad diet or relationship to food. And last weekend at this conference I had a great seminar I attended on emotional eating. And do you find that an area with a lot of your athletes that you coach in your world, with a lot of people that have issues with food and emotional eating habits, and try to out exercise their nutrition plan?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of, type A personalities just extremists, really, like people that do extreme things because they get high. They get a high off of doing things that are very difficult. And like a competition prep is an example, endurance sports is an example, like anything that you have to put forth, months of training and discipline would be a classic example. Like you put forth the utmost degree of intensity, dedication, discipline for a finite period of time. And then after that event, after that race, after that goal has been reached, there's like no roadmap. Like, do you cross the finish line and then what? And a lot of people do that with a competition prep. After the show's over, they just totally go off the deep end and eat everything in sight. And then they gain a bunch of weight. They feel badly about themselves. They start looking in the mirror and saying, hey, look, I was this disciplined for this many months and now I can't control anything. And for me, that was, debilitating. Like I was in a very, very bad place a few years back with regard to my relationship with food and my self-worth. And I was not happy with the person I had become. And I feel like with anything in life, you have to have a holistic view. There's no finish line. There is no finish line. Death is the finish line. You have to always be moving forward in some way or another. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be tracking your macros consistently for the entirety of your life. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like on your A game with everything, but pick something and then always have a goal and strive towards improving that, one step further every single day that you're alive. And if you have that goal that you're always reaching towards until the day you die, you're much less likely to go off the deep end and just have no direction.
That's so true. And I think a lot of people, like example last month was Ironman Hawaii, and a lot of people get done that because they built up for that race all year. You have to qualify to get there. So they've done a previous Ironman and you get done, you're like, okay, I'm done. Now what? And I think that's where endurance athletes get sucked into overtraining, because this is what I shared in my story, Life's Not a Race, that, okay, I got done, then you're in shape. Like, all right, I can do Malibu Marathon in November. Oh, that 50K trail run in San Francisco. I'm in shape. I can do that. I'll start trail running. Oh, all right. I just got off of that. Well, I can do a marathon in January. And then so you overtrain and you never give yourself a break because you don't know what to do with your free time. And people keep doing that because they're reaching for that high. So I think you get addicted to exercise, and maybe the fear of having time, free time, and not knowing what to eat because you're like, oh, I'm not working out 20 hours a week. Now what am I going to do? And I think it's a struggle for a lot of athletes in all of our sports.
Yeah, I think all sports, have that in common for sure. And I don't know, I feel like honestly, having the social platforms now, you can leverage that. I feel like I've got people counting on me to be a good example. So the last thing I want to do is let them down, especially after all they've done to help build me up. And I feel like I owe it to them to maintain control and discipline and consistency and make sure that I don't go off the deep end and illustrate that it's possible. And I think just simply being honest with yourself and others and showcasing that there is more to life than that crazy big cheat meal. If you put so much self-worth in a meal and a flavor that your life suffers, there's something wrong there. You have to be honest with yourself and recognize that and then work to improve upon it.
Well said. So that I had another question. Have you read Symons Book or listened to him at all in metabolic autophagy? Yeah,
I had him on the podcast when his book first came out. I love Sim. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I'm interviewing him on Friday, and his book is really, really long. I still haven't finished it because I keep going back and rereading things. So I just was curious what you got out of his research, kind of collaborated all these different books you read and put into one. So it's a great resource for people to get. And he put a lot of effort into putting this huge book together for very affordable, like nothing price. So everyone should go to Simland and get that metabolic autophagy book. There's a huge section on, work doing keto for athletes, endurance athletes, and bodybuilding. But what do you find that you took your takeaways from listening to him and putting it with your own life and your own research?
So one thing he's really good at is taking, like he and I both agree that there is no one size fits all. Like everybody's going to be different, and you can really kind of know. You have to experiment and know kind of enough about you as an individual and be in touch and in tune with your body and your mind enough to know, okay, this works really well for me, this doesn't. But being willing and accepting of jumping out there and experimenting with things. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you gain a couple pounds of body fat or your performance suffers a little bit, but it takes a couple months to figure something out, whether or not it works or not, that's time well spent. You know, in the grand scheme of your life, being able to play around with things and see if it works or not is huge. So I really respect the fact that he writes about there being more than one way to do things, and everybody is individuals and they have to go out and experiment accordingly. So I think he does a great job at kind of offering some of the different options people have, and then gives them a good roadmap and tool as far as how to implement it and see kind of get them on the right track, so to speak.
Yeah, I really love what he has in there, because I always say when I wrote my book too, and the Holistic Method Manual is about that Goldilocks effect. You know, it's always for everything, fine tuning, as you're saying, and what's too much, more is not always better, and less is sometimes more, but also too little of something causes deficiencies, too much of something causes toxicity. And finding that right amount, tuning it in for your body, I think is what we all need to do, but sometimes can be very difficult for people to learn how to stop, pause, and listen to what their body's telling them of how you should train, how you should eat, and how you should sleep, and how to manage your stress, and how to decompress. So I think it's great information. The fasting part, I have some clients that aren't really athletes, but they know someone that's into the 3-day fast. And I find that it's great to do if you can do it once in a while. But then I find these people fasting almost too much. It's like, why people kind of do too much or too little of everything. And then they don't know what to eat when they eat. And what's interesting, this emotional eating seminar last weekend, she said intermittent fasting is not beneficial for a lot of people that have eating issues, because then they think, oh, that time restricted window, I can eat whatever I want if it's, still being keto or keto carnivore. But then you go to a binge fast and then, all right, I ate within my 8-hour window or my 1 meal a day, but I just ate 10,000 calories. So it's just always fine tuning, one extreme to the other, find that middle of the road, that Goldilocks effect that works for you. That is, as we're all saying, is so individual.
Totally agree. I feel like, to your point about the fasting, if someone's struggling with eating disorders and their relationship with food, like I would not advocate them get into fasting. I mean, get fat adapted and do so with as many meals throughout the day as necessary. But if you're struggling with, going off and binging, having like a feasting and fasting, protocol, doing like intermittent fasting and extended fasting is probably not the best thing for you.
Yeah, that's why I think it's challenging for, I'm doing group programs now, and I think you still have to individualize it and get people to do one-on-one coaching, because I don't know what you're finding with your coaching athletes, bodybuilders, but everyone's so individual. So it's so hard to do. Yeah, start with this group, but I really want you to transition to private coaching, because everyone's so different and everyone responds different. And the fat adapter process is unique for each individual, and their hang-ups with food and their relationship with food and their stress levels. It's really hard to just teach everyone, here, let's do this, versus, working with each person. But I know it's a commitment and it's more of an investment for people, but it definitely is worth it to get one-on-one coaching. So how do you do your programs and what do you offer?
So I just do the one-on-one coaching. I feel like, with the type of, like I work with people that are not specifically just trying to do a competition prep. I'm probably going to transition that and solely work with competition prep athletes, because I want to be ultra niche in that department. That's kind of where my specialty is, where I shine. So I really want to focus in and double down on that. But I feel like with me, I adjust macros every single week. Like there is no blanket statement for anything. Like it's all individualized. Everybody's going to respond differently. Everybody gets different macros. And, I adjust according to their feedback. And that's why I don't really put a whole lot of weight in, like coaches that give out a PDF that they give to everybody with the same meal plan, the same macro. That just doesn't work. Like people that do that, they just need to wake up and recognize that, the $20 they spend on a PDF is not a huge investment compared to one-on-one coaching, but it's not also going to work. So you have to pick and choose your battles there. But, and I'm not suggesting everybody has to have coaching by any means, but simply being in tune enough with your body and kind of knowing what path to go down and truly listening to your body. Like a lot of people jump into one thing, they give it like a week. They say, oh, this isn't working. They jump into something else. it takes more than a week for your body to get adjusted to that stimulus. So giving something an honest try. I mean, look at the ketogenic diet, for instance. Like you're producing ketones after 48 hours, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're keto adapted. It doesn't mean you're keto adapted. I mean, even if you have a high ketone rating on the blood meter, that doesn't mean you're keto adapted. So the longer you're in ketosis, the better you feel, the better you perform. I mean, I've been doing it for 5 years now, and it takes time. As with anything in life that's worth having, anything in life that is good, it generally requires time, and people don't need to rush it.
So what is your definition of keto adapted then? How do you know if you're keto adapted?
Being fat adapted, that's simply like there's different levels to it. I mean, you're starting to become keto adapted after your body's burned through all, the glucose that you had for meals and starts turning to ketones and fat for energy. But the more, and I'm very much so on the side of strict keto. I know like cyclical keto and targeted keto is very popular right now. I view that is, like, some people can definitely get away with it. The more metabolically flexible you are, the more you can tolerate the higher carbs. But my opinion of the matter is, if you stick with a strict ketogenic diet and optimize for that, your body's ability to perform with that is going to be better than somebody that's constantly introducing all these variables. So I've been, strict keto for 5 years plus, haven't introduced carbs at all during that time. And my body's incredibly adapted and efficient at using ketones and both dietary fat and body fat for fuel. And the more you maximize that, the better you're going to perform on a ketogenic diet.
So you can tell you're fat adapted when you're full for 4 or 5 hours and your energy's up and you're feeling good in your workouts.
Yeah, like classic example, I like doing things I've never done before, just to like really push the envelope, so to speak. So I ran the marathon, having never run one before, having never trained for it. I did a 4.5 day fast, having never fasted before. Like I just dove in to see how my body would respond. And I trained every day during that fast, and I hit PRs every day during that fast. Like,
hold on, you said 4.5 days. Was it supposed to be 5 days and you didn't make it?
No, there was no defined time period.
Okay.
I never fasted before, and I'm like, well, let's just do 4.5 days. And I think I ate on that half day because I was going out with family or friends or whatever. Like, there was no defined start and stop time, but I just decided I was going to try it. And it's nice when you can subject your body and your mind to difficult things, big obstacles, big challenges, and you just blow through them with flying colors. And I feel like I'm able to do that in large part because my body is so proficient at using the fuel that I'm giving it and then taking it and running with it. And I don't think I'd be able to do that near to the extent that I can if I was constantly introducing carbs or some new diet hack or some crazy variable that just distracts my body from what the primary focus is.
And you don't feel like you're dieting. It's just normal for you.
Yeah.
Not restrictive.
Not at all.
Yeah. And I think that's what people need to get to, because I say the word that you said earlier all the time is sustainability. And I think if you make it a diet, as I hear and read and see a lot of people doing it, that it's not sustainable. And you're just going to be, saying, screw this and going back to your old habits. So my goal when I do my coaching program with clients is to get to feel like this is the new normal. This isn't a diet. I'm not teaching something for you for 30 days, 60 days, and you're going to switch back to your old habits. So hopefully your taste buds change and you go for the bitter versus the sweet, and you just feel the energy difference. So you lose those cravings, but you don't need to have those excess carbs as much. So I think that's kind of a process.
Yes, sustainability is key. I mean, if you're having a difficult, I mean, there's going to be some challenges at the onset, until your body kind of develops that habit. But at the end of the day, like the ultimate goal should be to be able to stick to a healthy eating protocol that you can stick with effortlessly, and then have the benefits of that compound exponentially over the course of your entire life. So if you're constantly going from one trend to the next, you're never going to have those compounding effects. Whereas if you're doing something that you can sustain and enjoy, you're going to truly reach the full potential.
Good. I know we're running out of time, so I just want to finish up with defining what you've been talking about. What your niche is the prep for competition. So if you can just kind of talk about define that, and then how to reach out to you and how you coach people.
Yeah, so I am trying to focus specifically on working with athletes that are wanting to do a bodybuilding competition, figure competition, basically stage composition type of event, and follow a strict ketogenic protocol in doing so. I feel like that is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck compared to other eating protocols for this style of training, this style of sport. So I definitely want to advocate for that. It's healthier metabolically and hormonally speaking. I just feel like it's better. And I really want to focus on those athletes. So as far as reaching me, I'm on Instagram, all the social platforms, my website, ketosavage.com. But if you type in Keto Savage, you'll find me. And then our brick, Keto Brick, ketobrick.com for that. And that's where you'll find us.
Well, great. I love talking to you, and I think it's pretty inspirational, all the information you're learning and sharing and making an impact in not just the bodybuilding world, but the whole keto world. And athletes of all sports can get some takeaways from this show, and as well as your podcast, and your website has tons of information. So we'll put all the links into the show notes. So thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to hopefully have you on the show again and talk a little bit deeper into the what you eat, when you eat, and how you eat.
Sounds great to me. I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.